Okay. Looks like it's live. There's always a weird delay thing on YouTube, but I think we've got it going now. And uh, I actually remembered to send an email like just a minute ago. So I'm going to just chat for a minute about Organize October and then what's next while we wait for people to hop on, since I sent a last minute reminder that we are live. So I'm hoping some more people will be able to join us live today. I'm excited to see in the chat what people have to say about interval planning or just about how things are going this whole month. I would love to hear in the chat right now what wins you've had this month, what success with planners you have had, because it's always good to start with what is working. We're going to make better improvements, better iterations if we start by recognizing what we are doing and what is working and our wins. We can build on that. But when we notice what is not working and we only notice the problems, we go into self-destruct mode. Like, problems just need to be torn down, right? They don't really, if we have only problems, then we will just be in critical mode and we'll tear things down without having an understanding of how to build things up. So we do want to start by recognizing what is working and the successes, the steps that you've taken this month, and the things that are working for you. Let's see, Carolina, did I say your name right? Carolina said that she saved a bunch of money simplifying and realizing what I really need in a planner instead of rebuying my expensive superfluous 2025 planner. That's awesome. Rachel says she's been keeping up with her day-to-day tasks. Not as great with the routine repeating things, but that's great. That's still progress. Another different Rachel says this month we had a few medical emergencies and planning didn't happen as much as I like, but the system I now have in place was really easy to jump back into. That's a great way to recognize the benefit even when you don't have the implementation you want. Like, you start by recognizing, like, this wasn't what I had hoped it would be, but there is something good there. This is a system that's easy to jump back into. That's a great step of progress and a good reminder to ourselves, like, no, I don't have to start over from scratch. I can jump back into what I had set up, because our tendency often is to just assume we have to start all over again, right? Carolina, you still have to tell me if I'm saying your name right, also says that she let go of the guilt of not filling every pre-printed box. Yes. Okay, so this is our last week of October, and we're talking about the interval plan, and today's session is going to be all about what the interval plan is. And if you're in Convivial Circle, we just did a Zoom call on Friday with our annual members, kind of working through how to make interval planning work and doing some initial legwork on getting a working interval plan. It ended up being mostly conversation rather than work, as we just did some troubleshooting over what does and doesn't work for people. But this whole week, the Simply Convivial podcast episodes are going to be about interval planning and about project planning. We have two podcasts with our team actually this week. And one of them actually takes this idea of an interval plan, but applies it to the holidays, because Thanksgiving and Christmas are an interval. Like, they are projects that we as moms are responsible for making happen. So, ending with interval planning right here at the end of October, I think is such good timing because we all have a very similar set of a similar need for an interval planning coming up, like right now, because we have a few weeks to prepare for making our holidays festive celebrations. So that counts as an interval. That's why we do interval planning. So we can say, hey, Thanksgiving is coming up. What should I do to prepare? Christmas is coming up. What should I do to prepare? What kind of Christmas do we want to have? That's going to take some advanced thinking and then some notes to self so that each week I can make progress on being prepared for Christmas. And so I think we can all kind of wrap our heads around understanding why that would work and how that would be helpful. And then interval planning takes that same process, that same way of thinking in advance, and applies it to different chunks of time throughout the year. So in Convivial Circle, starting on Saturday, starting November's monthly topic is going to be enjoying the holidays. Because this week we're putting together an interval for the holidays. That should be your first interval. Take what you learned this week, make an interval that is now through the end of the year. It's kind of a long one. That's about 8 or 9 weeks. But there's vacation in there, there's celebration in there, and it makes sense. And then after Christmas, prep, not just for a new interval, but a new year. This routine fits right now in a really just almost pre-prepared way. So just run with it. And then our monthly topic, talking about enjoying the holidays, will focus on our attitudes and our practices in making the holidays what we really want them to be. Okay, so what is an interval plan? I'm just kind of tossing it around. I mean, we talked about it in the opening workshop, but your interval plan is a big picture plan, but usually when you get a planner or you do any kind of workshop on planning, big picture is generally an annual plan. That's probably the most common. So, hey Shayna. The most common kind of big picture planning across the board is annual planning. So you'll have your yearly goals. Maybe some planners might help you break it down into quarters. But even quarterly planning is probably too much time to plan in advance for, especially as moms at home with children. Because a year, it seems, and the older I get, the faster a year goes. A year is a long time. It doesn't feel like as long of a time as it used to, but it still is a long time to plan for. That would be like planning for Christmas now, for Christmas next year, right? And it's no, we don't, right now, we should be planning for Christmas that's happening in, I don't know how many weeks, 8 weeks? That's the Christmas we need to be planning for, not 2026's Christmas. But, how is annual planning any different? You wake up, New Year's Day, and you're like, all right, time for New Year's resolutions. Here are the things that I want to get done this year. And, you make your list, and maybe you get started on a couple things, but it feels like you have plenty of time. You have a whole year. And so you make a list, it helps you feel better. You've spent some time daydreaming and thinking about potential progress you could make. And what happens to that plan? We all lose it or forget it. We aren't working from it throughout the year. And so the interval plan isn't about making that annual plan happen. It's about setting a more reasonable chunk of time to think about. So, particularly if we think about life as mom, our life can change rapidly. And so we do need a big picture plan, because we need to not just be only in the moment and only winging it, only doing what's urgent and right in front of us. But we do get into that mode easily if we're doing only the daily card, or even only a weekly review. Like a weekly review and getting a weekly dashboard is helpful, but that is more like the process that we need to tread water. It's how we just keep life rolling. And a big picture view allows us to make something bigger happen, or get some traction or progress on a bigger goal, something that can't happen in just 1 week. But we still need that big picture to be an amount of time we can actually work with, the amount of time we can see to the end of that deadline, where it feels like a real deadline. Because that is one of the hard things about mothering and homemaking, is there are no deadlines. Like, not really. Very few anyway. Like, a due date is almost kind of like a deadline, a kind of ambiguous one, because there's like a week of, or 2 or 3 weeks of not knowing exactly when it's going to be. But there are very few times where we have to clean out the fridge by a certain time. And so we can kind of do self-imposed deadlines where we're just trying to make ourselves feel bad if we don't get it done. Like, I really need to clean out the fridge, and so we just feel bad every day we don't do it. Instead of saying, okay, I can't do everything. I have to be strategic about where my attention goes. And I have to be strategic about what projects I take on right now during this period of time. And that period of time should be something like 6 to 8 weeks. There are always different people who, for different reasons, want to have a different length of interval. And the short answer, if you have your own reasons for wanting it to be something more or less than 6 to 8 weeks, the quick answer is, okay, well, try it and see how it goes. For the most part, after years of helping ladies implement interval plans, mine have always been about 6 to 8 weeks, usually 6. It just, I don't know, it's just an amount of time that works. So for I never like to just be like, you have to do it my way. That's not what we are about here. But I know if you come on to Convivial Circle and you ask for Stephanie, our community manager, to help you, she's going to try to talk you out of anything longer. Because she's helped, she's seen these situations and she's heard all the different reasonings. And 6 to 8 weeks is just an amount of time we can actually work with as limited, finite human beings. And that's a part of the point of interval planning, is recognizing that we are finite. We're limited. And our time is limited and our attention is limited. And so we are going to work within those limits to still do as much as we can without pretending that we're going to be doing it all. So it's kind of a way to intentionally not do it all while still focusing on significant progress. Yes, Rachel points out, she says, last year's annual plan was to hopefully get pregnant and maybe also have the baby if it's in the same year. Right. And sometimes that happens and we weren't planning on it. And your whole year is different. Like, all of us are starting January. Not all of us, but probably many. You're starting January and, you can make a prediction or you can have a hope, but you have no idea if you're going to be pregnant and deliver and postpartum. That is one huge thing all on its own. And so if you try annual planning, it can all go out the window with a pregnancy test, right? And then that can feel discouraging and make us think we shouldn't be planning at all. But if you do interval planning where it's just 6 weeks at a time, then you have a much smaller amount of time that gets thrown off with morning sickness. It's like, oh wait, here's morning sickness. I guess whatever was on my interval plan, we're just going to bring that down to the minimum because I'm going to be sleeping more and we're going to be working with a low energy mom for 2 months. So maybe you're going to have a first trimester interval then, and you're going to have a different set of expectations. And then second trimester mom might have a little bit more, but your attention is going to be honed in on what really matters. And then, third trimester, you go back to, okay, I'm going to have less energy. I'm going to move a lot slower. My focus is on growing a whole new human being. That's not nothing. My plan is going to account for that. It might not look like an ambitious plan on paper, but growing a human being is kind of a big deal. So it takes up room and space. And then postpartum, we have to acknowledge these as different times where we don't get as much other stuff done, and that's okay. And the interval plan gives us a category for working within our current circumstances and saying this isn't forever. And, especially when it's maybe first trimester and postpartum, you're thinking, I'm never going to feel like myself again. But, it's not true, but it feels like, you really should be doing more around the house or whatever, when it's just not the case. And it will pass. It's just a season. And so you can set a first trimester, a postpartum interval where you're acknowledging this is a time for more rest, more minimum viable everything, getting more help, and pouring myself into this new life. That's a big deal. And so we can make a plan that works with those different seasons. Then if you just have a bunch of little kids, the little kids' nap times, going through teething, going through clothes, all of that changes like every few months. So an interval plan lets you not get ahead of yourself too much, where then you get caught off guard. And, if you were making an annual plan, You don't know what the toddler's nap time is going to be like. Maybe he's going to suddenly be ready for potty training, but that wasn't on your radar because you're thinking a year in advance. Or you say, okay, I'm definitely going to do potty training this year, but then he's not ready. Instead, you're looking at it and saying, okay, we're going to probably look at that next interval. And you're only talking about like 6 weeks in advance. That's much more realistic. It's very helpful to think in 6-week chunks as moms and to allow ourselves to set limits and because limits allow us to focus. And we truly are limited people, and that's not a problem. We can work with our limits to still maximize putting our attention where it truly matters. Yes, so choosing your intervals based on what makes sense for your life right now is huge. Your intervals don't have to all be even. They don't have to come out even. They don't have to be, it doesn't have to look pretty and organized on a calendar. What you want is to just think about your time in logical chunks. And what's logical is going to be different for everyone and different for you on different years as well sometimes. So print out a calendar and mark off the big things that you already know are on there. Birthdays, holidays, big events, due dates. Maybe, you could think ahead about things like potty training or painting the living room or bigger things that you think, well, sometime I would like to do that. And then look at your year and the different things coming up and saying, well, could it possibly fit here? And it's not really a plan at that point so much as a list of options. It's a someday maybe. And so you could even have, a default interval. Like mine was always 6 weeks, 6 weeks on, 1 week off. But then if something comes up and you need to adjust and make your interval longer or shorter, you totally can. Because even planning your intervals doesn't have to be all set a year in advance. You do one interval, and then here's the key. You take a break week, a prep week between each interval to then set the next interval. So you have a sprint time, a time to work on things, put attention where it matters, get some progress, just go for it without letting yourself overthink, without going back into like square one planning mode because something didn't go the way you wanted. You're like, we're just going to roll with it. During our interval, we roll. Then we take a week between intervals to set the next one, to learn from the last one, make some tweaks. My personal rule, because I always wanted to redo my planner, and I always started noticing things I didn't like as soon as we were rolling. As soon as I used it the first time, it's like, what if I did it this other way instead? And I would spend way more time making the best planner than actually doing the real work I should have been doing. And so the rule I made for myself ended up being, I can only change things on my planner during my interval prep week. And I learned so much more about how to use a planner and how to make stuff work for me by sticking with something for 6 weeks rather than changing it up as soon as it felt uncomfortable or less than ideal. So during that prep week, you look toward the next interval and decide, well, is that interval that I set up, that I sketched out ahead of time, does that make sense? Should I adjust it? Do the projects that I picked for this interval need to be moved forward to the next one? How did I do with choosing goals and projects? What has changed that I need to account for? And you put together a next interval plan. And just like any other plan, an interval plan boils down to making notes to yourself for the next 6-ish weeks. You can use a template. I have a template available. There are a couple different templates available actually in Convivial Circle. But that's just a getting started point. That's a jumping off point. And really all it is notes to self. You can use a blank notebook. You can use a calendar that just has lines on the side. There's nothing magical about the page. It really is just the practice and taking the time to think about it. And then what makes the interval really work is looking at it during your weekly review. So the weekly review really is key to making all these planner pieces work, keep working. It's the upkeep that totally can take a long time, but doesn't need to. A 15-minute weekly review will keep your weeks rolling. And then during your interval prep week, you can maybe take a longer one, clean things up a bit more, spend a little bit more time thinking and intentionally iterating. But week to week, maybe it's just 15 minutes. But even at 15 minutes, the weekly review is what keeps the planner up to date, current, accurate, working for you. And during the weekly review, when you're putting together your weekly dashboard, you want to read over your notes to self, read over your interval plan, and let that inform some of the choices you make for your weekly dashboard. Like if you're going to get anything done in the next 6 weeks, you probably have to take some small steps during the week. So your weekly review is when you look at that interval plan and say, okay, what can we do this week? Well, in addition to keeping life rolling, and all that stuff's on my dashboard already, this project of cleaning out the pantry, which I'm acknowledging is not something that's just going to happen in a week. I'm going to clear one shelf this week and then another shelf the next week. And by the end of the interval, my pantry will be tidy. Instead of like waiting for the day where you can totally empty it and, do a total overhaul. You can break things down and set realistic progress goals to still accomplish things. And it helps us to break out of the all or nothing and boom and bust cycles that are so easy to fall into. So this week, as we talk about intervals, and especially with Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up, look at the calendar. By default, if you don't already have intervals set up, just set yourself an interval that is now to the end of the year, now till Christmas. And then the last week of December, right? We have a week. Oh, kind of. After Christmas is your prep week. Even if it starts on Friday or Saturday, depending on, what you're doing for Christmas. Give yourself an interval of now through Christmas, and this theme of this interval is celebration. Write down notes to self. What do you need to have happen to have those celebrations be what you want them to be? Make notes to self. Look at that every week as you are deciding what you're going to do this week, and you'll be prepared for the holidays. It really is that simple. And then after Christmas, you regroup and you set the next interval and make a plan for the next chunk. And as you do that over and over again, you get better and better at it. And you get better at fitting it to your life instead of trying to fit your life to the plan. Because the goal really is fitting the plan to our life rather than the other way around. We want to be maximizing and utilizing our real abilities, capacities, circumstances to the best of our ability, intentionally, not trying to conform our life to some ideal structure that we've lined out on paper. That's always going to leave us stressed and frustrated. But instead, we want to use the paper to help us structure our thoughts about our real life. And then we find ourselves managing our real life, with just cheerful competence. It's something we can do because now we're not, setting completely unrealistic goals and expectations. We're working with what we have and doing the best with what we have and acknowledging that what we have changes very rapidly sometimes. And that's okay. We have a plan for that. We can roll with that. We can work with that. Interval plans let us work with the ever-changing needs in a family home. So I'm excited to talk more about that this week, and especially inside Convivial Circle. And, I'd love to hear from you on how you are making that work.